Hello everyone, this is Ponder on Weather. In this update, we're going to be talking about Tropical Storm Ian, now expected to rapidly intensify into a Category 4 hurricane. Plus, we've got some severe weather to talk about and a cold front. Welcome back everyone, how's it going? This is your Sunday update. I appreciate all my followers out there and my new followers. If you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns on North America and the tropics, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to this morning on the North American view for the jet stream, and we can see this noticeable buckle up here into the east. That's going to be our trough. That's going to be the game player on where Ian decides to go, and it's going to be really influenced by the strength of this trough by the middle of next week. So let's take you through where Ian is currently right now. It is in the Caribbean, so right now it's a formidable 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm. You can see all the higher winds and the heavier rains are really right over Jamaica right now, as these systems typically are east side loaded systems. So, but it's going to be really starting to get its act together later on today, as this goes into a very deep tropical air mass and expected to rapidly intensify as it goes through the Cayman Islands and as it approaches Cuba, heading into the Gulf of Mexico by the middle of next week. So let's take you overall consensus currently. Right now, here's the latest update for Ian at the 8 a.m. advisory. Right now, it is currently a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm, really just south of Jamaica there, as it continues west, northwest, about 12 miles an hour here. We still have hurricane warnings into the Cayman Islands, as they're going to be taking the brunt of it later on today, especially into the overnight hours, going into the daytime tomorrow as a hurricane. You can see it's going to be rapidly intensifying to possibly an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane by the time we wake up tomorrow morning. And this will continue to intensify. Now that's why they have those hurricane watches for Cuba, as this will be now going to be upgraded to possibly a major hurricane. An hour 48, we're talking 120-mile-per-hour winds, and then expected to max out right around 140 miles an hour. So that's a significant increase from where it is now. That's 90 miles an hour in the next 3 days. So you can definitely see the National Weather Service is, looking at, say, hey, the National Hurricane Center is saying this is going to be rapidly intensify into a major hurricane. And then it's all dependent on that strength of the trough. Right now, the cone of uncertainty is essentially from Cape Coral all the way up until Pensacola, Florida. So really anywhere in between, you got to be on high alert from this system, as this will continue northbound, and this is by Thursday. So we're going to be talking about Ian for a while, so we got plenty of time to track this system and get prepared what Ian's going to bring later on this week. So, but before that, we got some severe weather to talk about today. Today is we got a significant upper level low that's going to be moving across the northeast, and that's going to bring some stronger thunderstorms really starting around 4 or 5 o'clock. I see it into the late afternoon, early evening time frame. So they do have a slight risk for severe storms today and portions of West Virginia back into Pennsylvania, New Jersey back into New York, as well as Long Island here. Those storms could be bringing some hail with it, some quarter-size hail potentially, maybe even some ping pong, but more pocket change hail. They could be bringing some higher wind gusts of some 60 to 65-mile-per-hour wind gusts. And you can't roll out an isolated tornado. So we actually have 3 all modes of severe weather with these this storms system is going to be moving across later on this afternoon. I do feel the main timing from this is really going to be about 4 to 10 o'clock. In 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock today. So up here, you need to be on high alert for those storms to really going to be fairly significant, as these will be moving across up there in the northeast. So, and they also can be bringing some higher wind gusts. So I do feel maybe in some later updates in this afternoon update, it's going to be probably shifting a little bit further south. But yeah, some higher wind gusts in West Virginia, back into Pennsylvania, back into New Jersey, back into New York. Yeah, we could be looking at some 60, 65-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Definitely not out of the question. Some of those higher wind gusts could be pushed down to portions of Virginia, but even North Carolina could get some of those higher wind gusts. later on this afternoon. So let's take a look at the overall setup for the rest of the country. So I did mention a cold front. So we are going to have a cold front. Most of the central part of the U.S. have already experienced that cold front, but they've also experienced the very dry air, extremely dry air for this time of year back behind that front. But I know you're looking for rain in Dallas. It's not much, but at least it's something. We got about a 20% chance with this front moving through 4, 5, 6 o'clock today. So the lucky few, if you happen to get underneath that one of those showers, expect a little quick downpour, but then it'll be moving across, and we got extremely dry air on the backside as this will continue to move across. And really the main instability is going to be right around that warm front. That's why they've got that severe threat in portions of the Northeast today. So, but tomorrow, that front will continue to shift off further to the south. Now it's reaching the coastline. Back behind it, it's just nothing but dry air, extremely dry air for this time of year. So there's really not much rain to speak of for a good chunk of the west, up to the north and the central U.S. Back behind this cold front, the main game player this week is going to be Ian. As this will continue, you can see it's off the screen right now, but it's not until really Tuesday that's going to be close enough where it's going to be influenced by this front, going to be stalled right around into Florida. So they're going to be seeing some stronger thunderstorms going even on the day on Tuesday, as Ian will be making its approach into the Gulf of Mexico by then. So then it's all about the steering flow of this trough that's going to be diving down off the East Coast here. But for the rest of the country, it is bone dry. I mean, look at these dew points back behind it. I mean, it's kind of rare to see how dry this is for later September timeframe, because typically, this is fall, right? So typically you have a little bit more moisture in the atmosphere, but not this week. I mean, back behind that front, it's going to be one of those times where, the heat index is actually lower than what the actual temperature is. That gives you an indication how dry this air mass will be back behind the front. So yeah, it's kind of makes it weird that we're even talking about a potential major hurricane coming into the Gulf with all this extremely dry air going to be locked over a good chunk of the United States this week. So it's all about the trough up here to the East Coast, right? So back behind that front, we got severe clearing. We got warmer temperatures, but like I mentioned, most of these temperatures actually going to be feeling a little bit lower than the actual temperature. So it's going to be feeling like fall for sure for much of the country with just extremely dry air. At least you won't have the moisture to work with. But yeah, it's all about the strength of this trough that's going to be diving into the Northeast and how this influences the overall steering currents. So let's really delve into this. So here's the latest GFS, and as it's taken advantage of, again, that National Hurricane Center track of blowing up into a possibly Category 4 hurricane by the time we get into Wednesday. That's a significant dangerous eye right there in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, taking advantage of that loop current that we actually talked about yesterday. So then it gets influenced on the steering mechanisms where the trough is going to be setting up. But overall, this is the latest guidance from the rapid intensification guidance. And the National Hurricane Center has went ahead and said, hey, we agree with this. I mean, it's got up to a 72% chance that between now and the next 72 hours, we could be looking at a 65 knot increase, and even 42% chance of a 70 knot increase just in 48 hours. So I would say the National Hurricane Center is at the top of the range, depending on the latest model runs, reaching out up to 140 miles an hour. So overall, here's the consensus of the latest update for the, all the models that we're looking at. Again, the cone of uncertainty really shifts depending on the strength of that trough. So yeah, if you live anywhere from Cape Coral all the way to Pensacola, you need to be on high alert from this system as this gets into the Gulf of Mexico, because any deviation in this track could make a huge impact on impacts for your area as this continues to lift off. But it's not going to be until the Gulf of Mexico until around Wednesday timeframe. So Tuesday up here, but back into Wednesday in the middle of the Gulf here, and it should make landfall sometime possibly Wednesday, depending on the track, Thursday. And if it takes more of a northerly turn, it could be even Friday before it potentially could make landfall. So let's take a look at the overall details, because here's the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. Yeah, there is Wednesday morning, about 1 o'clock in the morning, right? That is a significant system, 140 miles an hour. You're talking wind gust of 165. So remember, Fiona packed out about 130. So this could potentially even be stronger than what Fiona was, as a strong Category 4 hurricane barreling off the coast of Tampa back into Cape Coral, right? So depends on the strength of this trap. Some models actually have a little bit more stronger trough, which would make it a more of a beeline towards Cape Coral into more of a Tampa Bay area. And obviously that would be a significant dangerous setup. If the trough is a little bit weaker, then it would be lifting further north, and it would actually have and be influenced with a lot of shear the further north it goes, and it could potentially make landfalls. Maybe you have a Category 1 if it takes more of a northerly turn. So depending on the strength of this trough and where this is going to be making landfall, it makes a significant impacts on the significant difference on the overall impacts from this system. But right now, based on the current track from the National Hurricane Center, this is from the coastal emergency risk assessments. So this will change depending on the exact track, but this kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at as far as the maximum water heights here back into Tampa. Right now, just on this current track from the National Hurricane Center, we could be looking at up to 10 feet of water rise in Tampa Bay. So that is definitely concerning just on this initial track from the National Hurricane Center, and even further south back into Sarasota, several feet of water, and where it could potentially make landfall, at least this current track, back into Cedar Keys. Right now, it's forecasted to make landfall in between Cedar Keys and Appalachia. But that will be, obviously changing based on the track of this overall system. So here's what's concerning, because I put this side by side. Here's the latest overall track from the National Hurricane Center. But here's the overall track of the latest European model. So I can show you the significant difference, as this makes it a stronger system out into the Gulf of Mexico and taking advantage of more of that loop current, and then weakening, feeling the shear between Appalachia and Cedar Keys as a Category 1 hurricane on Friday. But if it takes more of a European track, it would be a little bit lighter setup because it's less time over water, but intensifying going into a Category 2, and this would be a dangerous setup for Tampa Bay. It would take the initial direct hit from Ida. So this would be, not Ida, Ian. There's a lot of I-name storms. This is Ian. This system back into Ian on Tuesday, or back into Wednesday. That would be a devastating blow, obviously, for Tampa Bay. So this is deeply concerning, depending on this overall track. But here's the consensus from the European models and the overall GFS models. Most of it, yes, taking a direct hit for Florida, but we could be looking at inland flooding too. So once this makes landfall, it's going to push inland. So we could be looking at some significant flooding into portions of Georgia, back into South Carolina, as well as back into Virginia and North Carolina. So most of the consensus has this making a beeline inland, and then making more of an inland flooding, and then we would have a tornado threat with this system too. So we could be looking at major impacts from Ian in the days ahead. But here's the overall setup as far as winds on the latest run from the European model, and this would be a dangerous, devastating setup for Tampa Bay, as it would put the brunt and the direct hit as a Category 2 over Tampa Bay. So that is definitely deeply concerning, as this will continue to move across, dumping those higher winds over Georgia as well as South Carolina into North Carolina. But the overall GFS, I would say right now, this is more of an outlier from the overall consensus, but it does push it further north and has it staying over the open waters, weakening as it comes ashore, possibly as a Category 1, but that wouldn't be until Friday, with more time over water. So, but for the rest of the country, it's all about the heat and the cooler conditions, less humid conditions for much of the west and much of the central US. But then it's all about the trough, bringing much cooler conditions over the next 7 days, and it depends on the strength of this overall trough. But for the most part, back behind that front, I mentioned extremely dry air, right? This is 10 days of rainfall. and all that white is basically zero. So there's not much rain to speak of. I mean, it just sucks all the energy out of the atmosphere with Ian, this setup heading into Florida, going up the East Coast. But we could be looking at some significant totals back into portions of the Southeast, heading up to the East Coast this weekend. And if it does take that European track, let's zoom into that. That would be extremely devastating for Tampa. I mean, 27 inches, guys. That's very 27 inches. Okay, that's an extreme amount of rainfall, and that swath would put it, 14, 15, a foot of rain in Orlando. So that would be a devastating impact. And again, these are right side loaded systems, so don't get caught up on where the eye is going to make landfall, because we could be looking at huge impacts onto the right side of this system going forward. But overall, this is the overall Weather Prediction Center guidance. Not much rainfall to speak of in the portions of the out west and the central U.S. It's all the track, and overall consensus of a 7 to 15 inches across Florida and the week ahead, and then inland flooding with tornadoes with this system back into portions of the Southeast, riding up the East Coast. So I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after.